to create a list inside of Kotlin, it's pretty easy. You can just say, let's create a variable here, and we can say val items equals list of, and then you can provide a list of, perhaps a list of primitives like we have here. So we have a list of integers. This is very similar to how it's done with the array of operator for arrays. So if we want to loop over each one of these and print them out to the screen, we could say something like this, say items for each, and then once we compile this and print it and run it, it will then print to the screen as we see in the output down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we have a list here. Now this is important to note here that this is actually an immutable list. So if you notice here, I don't have the add method here. I can't add an item to the list at all. So if we look at the implementation of list of, we'll see that here that's going to return a new read-only list. So that means that we cannot add items to it. The same thing goes for if you were to create a list of, perhaps a list of users. So let's say list of, and then we can actually create a list of users. So I'm just going to do a new line here. Say Don Felker. And then we can have another one would say user would be perhaps Jane Doe, and then so forth. We could have a number of them and so forth. And of course, we could also iterate over these as well pretty easily. So we'd say users.forEach, and inside of this, we'd say print line. And inside the print line, we could just say, we could print the user. And that's going to call the toString method on the user, just like it did when we did the array version. So we'd see Jane Doe and John Doe. And I actually did print here. I didn't do print line, so I'd all put it on the same line. Print line will add each item onto a new line as we see here. So again, these are immutable lists. If we want to add an item to a list, we're not going to be able to do that. So we have to create a mutable list, which will be in the next lesson. So here we can also get access to items. So maybe we want to do the first item. We could say users.first. And it's going to give us the first item. And notice the first method, this is an extension method on top of a generic list. So we have a first item. So if for some reason there was a default, if we were to print this here, let's actually do print line, just to show you what this looks like. We should see Don Felker again printed, and there we go. Now there's also the opportunity here for us to perhaps maybe we need to create an empty list for whatever reason. Maybe we have a null value or something like that. So let's say that we have a name. So let's say val name, it could be a nullable string equals whatever. And for whatever reason, the code is null. And then we want to create a new list, and we could say stuff. We could say it's going to be if the name is null. So if we want to do something like this, we put it around the if statement. If the name is null, then we could return an empty list, and that would just return us an empty list. Otherwise, we can then return a list of name. And what that's going to do is automatically the compiler is going to infer, oh, since Don is doing a list of name, it's going to be a list of strings. Otherwise, this is going to be an empty list of strings. Now notice here, I was getting a compiler error because it doesn't know enough about the type here. So if I wanted to specify the type for empty list, I could actually say string there, it would work. And we could say list of name. Now, at this point in time, you can see that this is grayed out because the compiler can infer the type. So it can go ahead and remove that explicit type argument. Now, empty list, all it is, again, is just a function. It just gives us an implementation of what's known as an empty list. It doesn't have anything in it. There's basically the size. If you look at it, the size is 0. Is empty is hard-coded to true. So this is just kind of a general helper method inside of our application. So if we were to see if this was empty, we could actually say stuff.isEmpty. That would return true. We'll see a bunch of different other methods on here as well. We can see if a list is empty. Again, we can't add anything to it because it's an immutable list. So that's one way we can work with an empty list. Now, we can also grab the last item of a list. So we can say users.last. And that will give us the last item of the list. And at that point in time, we can also print that to the screen, which is going to go ahead and show Jane Doe at that point in time. And then we have Jane Doe. So there's a bunch of different operators on the list you can look at. So you can just say users, and you can use IntelliSense and code completion to check it out. You can do last with a predicate, all different types of stuff, which we will cover in the future. And you can also get the first value or null if it's nothing's there. So we'll see here. Returns the first element or null if the list is empty. So there's a bunch of different things that you can check for there as well. And that's how you easily can create a list inside of Kotlin with either primitives, or you can create it with objects.